Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, wherever you are around in this fine world. We're heading towards New Year's, and we have a special WOWSA live interview with Darren Miller. Welcome, Darren.
Steve, great to see you.
Good to see you. So you're a Renaissance man of sports. You were a sprinter, a collegiate sprinter in college. You did some powerlifting, bodybuilding. Then you got into marathon swimming, accomplished the Ocean 7, all in your first go round.
Yep.
First time that was done when you did it. And now you're into ultra marathon running. Like, how many lives do you have in sports?
Well, I love the fact of like trying to do the most extreme of each of these things. You know what I mean? I think that's what you could figure out pretty quickly is what drives me. Right. So
got it.
Yeah. So it's been to go from collegiate sprinter to I always joke, I never thought I'd be doing distance. So I told my parents, I said, well, instead of waiting 8 hours to watch me swim for 20 seconds in the pool, you can watch me swim for 20 miles in the pool or in the ocean now, so but yeah, definitely very, very different. I never thought in a million years I would have been doing anything distance, but right out of college is whenever I got started with marathon running, right? A couple years right out of college, started running. But to your point, you mentioned powerlifting. I was about 270 out of Penn State when I actually left college, and just was going through, and I've been open about it, just going through just a tough time, a lot of challenges in my life at that time, legal with school, finding a job that I wanted and such, and I lost some friends to drugs and alcohol violence, and just like some people that go through that tough time, right? And I remember being at the gym and I was bench pressing. And, the hardest part is when you leave college, you have all your buddies there helping you out. So when you go to the gym and you're doing bench press, you got people all around you helping you out. Come on, and then you go back to your family gym after college and it's like you and like the Zumba ladies, and you're dropping a weight. Everyone's looking at you like you're crazy. So that environment completely changed. And I remember one day sitting up at a bench press, and I was like smoking a pack a day, drinking a pack at night, and I'm just like winded after doing a bench press of 10, and I'm like, this is not what I want right now. Like I need to make a change. Like this is not a good direction I'm going. And it just so happened to start dating a girl that was a runner, and she ran marathons and half marathons and said, hey, come to the track and start running with me. And as the story goes, I just went to the track and I never ran anything other than that dreaded 1 mile in gym class that most of us had to do growing up. But I started running with her and I just lost, 5-10 pounds. I stopped smoking and I was like, wow, I feel great. Right. So naturally the extreme in me just went right to let's run a marathon. I never ran a 5K or a 10K. I just signed up for a marathon. And I picked this one in particular. It was in North Central Pennsylvania, and I'm from Pittsburgh, right, growing up. But it was called God's Country Marathon. I was like, oh, okay, that sounds like a good one. I didn't read the topography of the course. And it was like 16 miles up and over this mountain, right? Well, I weighed about 250, 255 when I started that run that day. And that was in June of 2008. And after I finished that, I was in a world of hurt that day, because I looked like I could eat the guy next to me at the starting line. But after 4 hours and 21 minutes or something of this race, I just remember, limping to the car, and the next day waking up and looking down the steps and just stopping, and being like, oh, and most runners, people who have run a marathon like yourself, I'm sure you can remember, those days where you're looking down the steps and it's like, everything hurts, But it was crazy. Then right away I was like, well, what else can I do? Right. And that's when, as the story goes, I ran a couple marathons. About 10 months later, the goal was to qualify for Boston. I lost about 70 pounds, 80 pounds.
Wow. In how many months did you lose?
So my first marathon was June of 2008, and I qualified for Boston in May of 2009. So about 11 months.
Wow.
From my first marathon, 11 months, my first marathon, I qualified at Boston, for Boston. But it's funny, like to me, I didn't care to go to Boston, right? It was just the challenge. And we talk about the grind and what we go through. That the goal was not to go and run Boston. The goal was like, wow, could I run a 3-hour marathon, And then I did, right? Right after that, and then history took another change, and that's when I got injured. I fractured a bone in my foot, just overuse, being as big as I was, running as hard as I was, and then losing the weight and, going faster and faster, and just an overuse injury. I'd signed up, and then I ran a 50 mile on a banged up foot. Right. So that was that next level of pain where I'm walking around in one of those boots thinking to myself, now what? Right.
Wait a second. Time out. How long does 50 miles take?
Well, that run, let's see, that run was 9 hours and 30 minutes, I think it was.
Okay.
That was my first 50 mile, and that was in June of 09. So it was right after the Pittsburgh Marathon, but it was right before I got injured. And my orthopedic was like, yeah, you shouldn't run this 50-mile race. Like, your foot is literally fractured, you know? And I was like, well, as you all have come to know, I'm a little stubborn, right? So I ended up running the race. And after that, I was just in another world of hurt. But I was walking around with a boot on, all right? And that's whenever I read the book. I can't remember how I got my hands on it, but I read Swimming to Antarctica, like so many swimmers have read. I was just inspired and interested in open water swimming. Again, I did like a 5K Lake Erie swim, and it was like just with friends when I was like 16 or something, you know? So that was my only experience with open water. I didn't know anything about it. And then I was like, right around that time, my friend had lost her dad to open heart surgery, and we wanted to come together and do something for the charity to raise money. And we came together. I wanted to go toward kids. Hers was heart related, started at the Children's Hospital. And I said, hey, pay for me to go swim the channel, and we'll do something to raise money for your dad. And she was like, this sounds like a great idea. And of course, we're both like, yeah, let's do it, you know? And then I still remember the first day going out to Keystone Lake, and it was 58 degrees. And I was supposed to do my 6-hour qualifier that day. And it was in October, because we signed up in October for a July swim. So, you know, again, I only had like 8-9 months to train for the channel. And I remember walking into the lake, and I literally went into my waist. And I remember I had my buddy on the kayak. I had somebody with the camera. I had my feeds ready. And I stood there for like 10 minutes. I was like, oh, hell no. And I turned around and I walked out. So that was like my first, like, oh shit moment, you know, pardon my French, where it was like, oh, this is going to be hard, you know, swimming 20 some miles in this cold of water. Right. So then it's like, all right, like anything that I talk about, it's how are we thinking outside the box, right, to handle the pain. So I knew my biggest challenge was going to be overcoming the cold, right? Most people always ask, you know, is it the sharks? Is it the distance? No, hypothermia is, in my experience, in my opinion, number one challenge that we face as open water swimmers. So I was taking cold showers. I was, you know, outside in my cattle trough all winter long, like Wim Hofing it up, sitting in that thing for 20, 30 minutes at a time, not moving. And just doing whatever I could to get used to the cold, and then started swimming longer and longer in the pool, because we didn't have open water. I mean, the biggest challenge of being in Pittsburgh is we're landlocked, right? I mean, we have the rivers, sure, but at that time I wasn't really swimming in the rivers. I found myself a 0.86 mile long lake, and that's pretty much what I just went back and forth on. And that was from, you know, maybe May until, you know, October, right? Okay. As best as I could, but all winter long, I mean, you know, we're confined to, I was in a 84 degree, 23.5 yard LA Fitness pool for like half my training for the Ocean 7. I tell people, I said, yeah, I swam in a hot pool, you know, where these old ladies would get out of the hot tub and they would come in the pool and they would be like, oh, it's freezing in here. You know, what is this, 55 degrees? And I'd be like, man, do you know what 55 degree water feels like? I was like, this is 84, but good try, you know?
So you read Lynn Cox's Swimming to Antarctica, and that was the winter before. Yep. And then did you utilize your competitive swimming background to like formulate a plan, or did you have a coach, a mentor?
No, I never had a coach, never had a mentor. I just started going at it. I figured if I could run 26 miles, I could swim 26 miles, you know? So I kind of adapted a marathon running regimen training to that, right? And from what I remember, I mean, this was 13 years ago, but I'm pretty sure that's what I did. And then I just kind of figured, all right, like 4-hour swims back to back, just like I would do a 2-hour run or 3-hour run back to back, you know? So I kind of I just trained myself through that time. Started to get to meet some people right through the community. We didn't have the forum back then, or all I really had was your amazing webpage that I would, you know, your daily news of open water swimming, I would read like every day. But other than that, I mean, and I would just do some research, like, you know, hey, I was one of those people literally like, how do you swim the English Channel? You know what I mean? It's like I didn't, you know, but you know, over that period of time, you got used to it. And again, I just got used to being in the cold, and that's how I trained for the English Channel. And then that was in July of 2010 went over and just had a good day, good experience, and we did great. And then right after that, came back, and that's when I found out about this whole Ocean 7 and started going out. And another big question I get is all about, fundraising and how do you find sponsorships and stuff. And, being in the financial world, I was lucky to have basically a private firm come to me after I gave a speech. And I always tell people, I said, get out and make your wish, your desire known and sell it. You know what I mean? Mine was the charity, what we were doing it for. And this guy, I had a picture of my cattle trough breaking it with an axe. And this guy was like, this is insane. I want to find a way to tie my business in with what he's doing. And so, yeah, he just came to me the next day and said, how much. The email was literally, how much will this cost? That's all he said. And in my head, I'm thinking, so I'm trying to figure out what the remaining 6 would cost me. And I just threw out a number to him, and he was like, all right. So his firm paid all those costs, and then everything we fundraised went to the hospital, and still to this day, so that was a blessing. Right. So these things in my life.
I want to go back again. So you're in that Keystone Lake, you go up to your knees, you have all your buddies around, you're shivering, and you say, forget this. You turn, you make a U-turn, you go home. Now, what prompts you to go back into that lake? Because that's a huge leap.
So how I do things, and this is how I do it, is that when I am going after a challenge, I make it known what I'm doing. And then you don't have anything to fall back on. I know I know not everybody's that way, right? Some people like to keep their goals to themselves, and that's fine. Everybody's different. Me, it's just like when you put it out there, I'm going to swim the English Channel in 10 months. I'm going to raise money for a specific charity. I'm going to get involved in this charity. I'm everything about me is going to be, how do I train and how can I accomplish this goal? In the same way that I went for Boston, right? To not being a runner, to losing 75 pounds and qualifying for Boston. But again, that was the grind of what I had to do, and then I just adapted that to marathon swimming. I didn't have a plan. I didn't know what I'll just say I didn't know what I was doing, but you're developing the mind, right? To like, what we're going to talk a lot about is like overcoming the pain of sitting in a lake, and I always remember so many people be like, oh, I don't like cold water. You don't understand it. And I'm just like, well, yeah, I don't love cold water either. It's horrible. Like right now it's like in the 30s here in Pittsburgh, where I'm at home for vacation. And the thought of going out to that lake right now and getting in and swimming like I had done before is just like, it's terrible. I have no desire to do that. Right. But when you're in that moment, you do what you have to do, Surprise here. Oh, okay. Yeah, thank you. My daughter. But when you're in that moment, like you do what you have to do to be successful, right? By any means necessary. So my mind was trained to go to that lake and get in, and number one, it's acceptance of the pain. And then 2, it's just, you can't allow yourself in your mindset to say anything else like, oh, this is cold, you got to get out. It's knowing what you have to do. You got to go at 4 a.m. and you're getting in that lake and it's going to be freezing, and you accept it and you move forward. Right. That's about as blunt as I can be honest, like my mindset to overcome the pain. And it's like, yeah, it's horrible. It'd be like January and it's in the morning and it's like snowing, and I would be out there swimming as far as I could before I literally got to the point where I was shaking uncontrollably by myself. Probably not, the smartest, but then again, I didn't have people to come out and like babysit me while I'm doing it. Not every time, sometimes. Yeah. But it's when you grow up in an area like where I grew up, you have to develop that mindset where it's different than say someone who grew up in San Diego or LA or Cork or anywhere around the world where you have access to an ocean, right? It's just a different mindset. Like there were days the pool would be closed. And it's like, where am I going to go? Right. I just didn't have that year round cold water. So I took advantage of it in the wintertime and did the, ice baths and whatever I could. So to your point, like, how do you develop that? It's like, well, I knew what was on the line. I told people what I was doing, so I was going to accomplish it. I was going to do it for the charity, and I'm going to find a way to make this happen. It's that mindset of just not allowing negative energy, which it does. We're all worried. We all get fearful. You start doing a ton of media. You start doing interviews. You start, everybody starts chanting your name, and that's like, okay, well, I better do this. You know what I mean? Like kind of philosophy. I just like swimming 24 hours in a pool for a fundraiser. It's like things like that I just come up with in my head, and I'm like, how can I push myself? And I was like, oh, there was a 200-mile bike race I just randomly signed up for and rode for 17 and a half hours on a bike. Why? Because it was pushing my body out of that comforting space. And that's what just snowballed for the next 7, because could have the North Channel have been my first swim? No, I don't believe so. Handling Tsugaru, what we'll talk about as a first swim, no. But it's building from the marathon swimming, running days or the weightlifter sprinting days to the weightlifting days to the marathon running days to the marathon swimming, and it just keeps building this mountain, right? I'm not going to go run 100 miles as my first run. I ran a marathon, and then I ran 50, and then I've done a couple hundreds, so you're starting small and building bigger and bigger. And that's what allows the mind to know what you can accomplish. Like right now, the mindset of ultimately what we want is to say, there's nothing that I can't do. I believe in myself, right? That's the goal I think we should all have. And that any challenge in life, whether it's with our families or professional or athletic, it's the mindset to know I can do this. This might be crazy, but I will find a way to get it done.
Yeah. And finding a way to get done, you got it done in northern Japan. I was there on the boat. That was one of the greatest swims I was witness to.
Well, I wouldn't have made it if it wasn't for you, Stephen. That's for damn sure. So
okay. So everybody understands. He starts in the main island of Japan, which is called Honshu, and he swims across the Tsugaru Channel to the main island of Hokkaido. It's not that far, roughly straight line distance, 20 kilometers, but nobody swims 20 kilometers. There is a massive current that flushes from it on your computer screen from left to right. And Darren had to cross that from left to right. Now, as that current is flowing from the Sea of Japan to the Pacific Ocean, it hits the shoreline of Hokkaido, and it creates these giant eddies. There it goes. So on the bottom of his forearm is his start point.
Yeah, I'd have to hold it upside down to figure it out.
Yeah, and so when he hits when he approaches the shoreline of Hokkaido, his goal, he's got these giant swirling eddies. Sometimes those swirling eddies are small. Unfortunately, in Darren's case, it was massive and it was strong. So with that, what was your experience there?
Yeah, it was funny. So of all the swims, right? Ever since, I think it was yourself and David had done these swims in the early 90s. Other than that, there was really not much information out there. I mean, you were obviously a plethora of information, and the people that you had hooked me up with to help get it all arranged. But at the end of the day, you can't just Google Tsugaru Channel and it would like tell you all about it, right? So when I got over there, just from the start, it was funny. I mean, my brother and I flew over there. We landed in Narita. Right away, it's like Tokyo is just like, it's such a beautiful city. It's huge. It's massive. People moving everywhere. Not many people are speaking English. Luckily we had, like I said, we had some people to guide us to get us to where we had to go. And by the time we finally got all the way up there, right, we took the Shinkansen train. I remember going right through Fukushima, and that was really because that was not long after the tsunami. Getting up there and then just being in an environment where like we couldn't go buy normal bread, or we brought like my peanut butter and jellies that I love. I brought all that stuff with me because we didn't have a car. And the closest place to get any kind of food was like a gas station, like a half hour away. Luckily, we met a young man that he worked, or he went to the University of Minnesota, actually. So he spoke very broken English. And outside of, obviously, you were there. But just my brother and I just felt like we were in a very remote location, unlike any of the other 7 or the other 6. The Tsugaru Channel, if you're staying right in that, was it Tapi?
Yeah, Tapi, the peninsula. Yeah.
Yeah, the peninsula. It's remote. You know what I mean? I don't know if that's changed in the last decade, but it was remote. And I remember daily sitting there, and we just, the food was excellent. It was like a weekend, what they call like a retreat kind of deal. So it was a nice place to stay. But it was just, I remember looking out every day, and I remember we were talking and the weather, it doesn't look good today, or it doesn't, and then because at that time, and there were a couple names that are floating in my head, but I remember certain people had tried to have a go at it. And like, to your point, the currents and the eddy, all that stuff working around there, it was an unknown, people were getting turned around. It was like, wow, what is going on here? This is crazy. But we got out there that day, and I remember we left early. We got on the boat. I actually just watched this video the other day. But we got out there and we got to the start, and I remember it was just like, it was already pretty choppy. It was like misting in the air. I always joke the birds were flying sideways. It was pretty rough that morning. And where I made the mistake was, but in my head was to jump off the boat, go in and, touch the rock and go, right? But being stubborn, I was like, I don't want anybody questioning this, right? I jumped off the boat and I'm swimming in, and I have a video of this, and it was really a crazy start. But I went over to the rock and I climbed out, and I realized right away that was a bad idea, because the rock had just covered in super slippery slime and moss or whatever. And I took like 2 steps where, went right down and scraped the whole front of my shin and my whole forearm. And I just remember looking and seeing like blood, and I could hear my brother faintly in the distance, like, be careful, And I remember that moment, looking up, and I saw the 2 boats, and I remember that the sea was pretty ominous that morning, the landscape. And it's that moment where and this was number 5 of the 7, right? And I remember it was like, the only thing I could think of was, I may not get another chance to be in this moment, right? The amount of time, the amount of money that was provided by my sponsor to get me there. It was like that moment where, like, yeah, maybe I should go and get like a Band-Aid, or maybe I should stop. Maybe I shouldn't swim today. Maybe it was a rough day. I don't know. But I just got that in my head where it's like, you just move forward. You don't give yourself the option. If we're in a mindset that we decide whether we should move forward or not, right? I never gave myself that option in these challenges, because it was for what I was doing it for the purpose. And as a man of faith, you feel like you're put in certain situations in life, and this is your test. That was my test. That day that was a rough start, and we didn't even start swimming yet. We got in the water, started going. And I just remember being very choppy. I was not used to just breathing to the left and the right and just getting hit by these waves. And then it calmed a little bit. And then I got the video of later in the day when it was just like these little 1 to 2 foot waves hitting you in every damn direction. Like goggles were flying off, and for all I know, we were going. But I remember talking with you about this and thinking, oh, this is going to be like, an 8-hour swim or something like that, in my head. Right. Well, that's the first mistake I tell people, is don't ever give yourself a time limit on, especially, any of these endurance events. Like, just get out, put one hand in front of the other, get it done. But I remember after about 8 or 9 hours looking up, and I was like, no, I couldn't see anything. I was like, wow, I'm nowhere near Hokkaido. Right. And then that's around the time when I started asking you guys, which was uncharacteristic. I mean, I was like, how far are we, and then I think you guys, every hour you tell me like 5 miles, you know what I mean? Or something like that. Cause we were essentially just we're trying to go this way and we're going this way. Right. And, eventually it was just like, I think you said something like, just stop asking, like, just keep swimming, like start sprinting or something like that. And I'm like, oh God, and it's like 12, 13, 14 hours. And that mind space, 15 hours is a long swim. It's nothing compared to what some of these people have done, but it was just thinking that you were only going this far, and then having to keep mentally encouraging yourself, because it was getting dark. I remember there was some comments made possibly about having to be pulled at night because the Japanese military or something they didn't want swimmers in at night or something, so I'm thinking, I started developing this mantra because it started getting cold. And as I'm swimming, I'm thinking, they're going to pull, I'm going to get there, or they're going to pull me out. You know what I mean? Like, I was like, I'm just going to keep going. You just keep going, and, getting near the end, and finally, it's dark. I'm hitting things. I'm hitting fishing nets, thinking, what the hell am I swimming? Large something swims right below me. I mean, it was crazy near the end, but it was the hour after hour, how you're mentally, if you're told, you're really not getting any further. You're kind of swimming. And again, my conversation with you, I'm trying to remember, but it wasn't obviously a lot, you know what I mean? While you're in the water with earplugs and trying to figure out what the hell's going on. But I knew that something wasn't right, and my brother, I could see him like pacing, and, I love my brother, but like I said, if you weren't there to talk to him and explain things to him, there's no way we would have, gotten that swim done. But yeah, after 15 hours, 55 minutes. So pretty much twice what I was expecting it to be, getting to the other side. So that was the hardest swim of the 7 for me. And I would argue that was the hardest day of my life, regarding endurance sports. So, and again, we'll talk more about the 100-miler and how we compare the two and stuff, but that was, I would say that was the hardest day of sport, and why I have it memorialized here on my arm, to look at every day. And again, when you're challenged, it's like, no, it's not as tough as that,
Yeah. Yeah. Now, for the non-channel swimmers, what could you see in that swim, other than undefined floating objects below you?
So as far as from a psychological,
visual,
so from a psychological standpoint, I have a concept that I talk about. It's called the third boat, and I'm a very visual person. There's certain movies, right? Certain scenes in certain movies I love to go through in my head. Songs. I mean, I'm always singing to myself something. But the third boat to me is, we had, for example, in Tsugaru, we had your guide boat, and then we had a support boat. We didn't have a kayaker on that one, but there's the third boat, right, that nobody sees. And a lot of what I talk about as a speaker is developing that third boat. I argue that we should all have that third boat in our lives whenever we can't go any further, whenever we are just at a breaking point, whatever that breaking point is for you, right, along that spectrum. You look over and I would see it was basically a rowboat, right? And it would, and I get like tears in my eyes talking about this because it's so powerful to me, is that when I'm in that moment, I'm on the trail, right? Maybe they're in a little cart or riding a bike next to me, or they're in the boat when I swim. The third boat to me is the visualization of the people that inspired me, right? Number one being I've been adamant about was my grandmother. I put her as a hero in my life, as a goal of who, if today was my last day, would I have lived up to her the way that she lived, as an example of charity, of love for family, of love for her community, and everything she gave back. And she had a stroke making pierogies, which are little dumplings, at church to raise money for her church. And I always say, I said, her acts of charity and what she could do at the small town blue collar community of where they lived, right, for what she could give versus I'm out here swimming around the world, it's no different. We have this ability to by any means necessary to give back. And this is my philosophy on life. So when I would look over and I would see my grandmother and I would see my grandfather, and they would just say, keep going. I would see my friend Summer, who tragically lost her life, my buddy Jimmy, my cousin Kara, Jess, Kelly. I mean, I could just go down the line. Every swim, I think I had more people in my boat, right? But I would look over and you see them, they didn't have that opportunity in life that I was getting in that exact moment. I had the ability to find out what I'm made of. I have the ability to travel the world, to impact lives. And they didn't get that chance, right? So they're telling me to keep going, and it was for them, right? Why I would gnash my teeth and let out that snarl and keep going. Which is why I would say having that is so powerful, because there's only one time where I'm not saying this to like brag or something, but I've only purposely pulled myself in one race in my entire life. And that was when I tried to do that sub 3 hour challenge. But it's because of having that in your life, and as a reason, like if you're just going to go into one of these swims or a long run and just wing it and see what happens, I mean, you got to have a reason. You got to have a purpose. At least that's what I believe. Right. And I find that people who have that reason or that purpose that I've spoken with over the years and crewing or at my swim in Pittsburgh, when you have a reason and a purpose for doing it, you have a lot better shot, right, at accomplishing that goal.
And then when this is a good time to compare your ultra 100-mile marathon runs with something like any of the 7 channel swims.
Sure. Yeah.
How do you compare it physiologically and psychologically?
Yeah, psychologically the same. Over the blocks, the what I go through my head to overcome the pain obstacles, right? So in marathon swimming, it was, I'm starting to feel cold, right? Okay, no, I'm not cold. I just think I'm starting to feel cold. This is my body telling me, hey, maybe we should not do this right now because we're getting cold or this hurts. Your body will find ways to tell you to stop over and over and over, right? How you block those out when you're not actually in a bad place, right? So I'm not saying if like you're going down with hypothermia or there's a shark circling you, that's totally different. I'm saying like for all intents and purposes, if you have the ability to swim the channel, right, and you allow that negative energy to seep into your head because you're starting to hurt, you're starting to feel pain, you got to find ways to get through that, right? So with the regarding the pain, I mean that with swimming it's more shoulder pain or neck pain, right? With running, obviously it's going down hills, going down mountains, and your quads are just getting crushed, right? It just a different kind of pain. I wouldn't say one hurts any more than the other. It's just, again, I'm more focused on how do you overcome those moments where you're in that constant state of pain for 12, 24. My last 100 miler I did 47 hours straight. You're in a lot of pain, right? So sleep deprivation. I never had the problem in marathon swimming because my longest swim was 16 hours, right? I did swim 24 hours in a pool, but I never encountered sleep deprivation like I had done this past summer, doing a 100 miler in Ouray, Colorado. It was definitely the hardest one that I've done. That people regard it as one of the toughest in the world. It's 42,000 feet of gain. So it's literally just what I joke is a nonstop suffer fest, right? Probably should have been about 6 to 10 hours quicker, but I had some foot issues that it was a mistake I made with my shoes and stuff like that. But for the last, I remember climbing up this one hill at like almost 13,000 feet or 14,000 feet. And I remember thinking to myself, oh my God, I'm going to be out here for another 24 hours, but it's like little things like that may allow, it's like, what, stop. You know what I mean? Like you got to find that way to stop it and not just dwell in that negative space, because then the difference with, I remember Stephen Redmond said it best. He says something like, just touch the boat and all the pain can go away. That's almost like when you're doing an ultra run, you have your aid stations, right? So you got a real nice couple cooking you a hamburger and soup or whatever you want to eat at 3 a.m. when you're exhausted. And, there's a really nice looking chair over here that you can take a seat in, that's, it's like, no, block it out, The difference, I made a couple notes here. I think it's like, which one's harder? Okay. Now, again, I'm not trying to like offend my ultra running friends or my marathon swimming. I would argue that marathon swimming is a tougher challenge. I say that because in ultra, you are out there running, but you have aid stations, right? Number one, now, yeah, we have aid from the boat. True. But when you're swimming in the North Channel and it's 52 degrees, you're not going to sit there floating on your back for 15 minutes talking with your buddy on the boat, right? You're going to do like a Shelley Taylor Smith where you're drinking and paddling, like to stay warm, right? So you don't get those breaks in marathon swimming. You're in your head. You're wearing earplugs. I mean, you are literally in your own headspace that entire time for all intents and purposes. 98% of the time, you're in your own headspace. Ultras, aside from the aspect of seeing a aid station every 6 to 8 miles, give or take, you also have the ability to run with others. One of my favorite stories was I did a 100-miler in the Angeles National Forest in SoCal, and 70 of the 100 miles I ran with this anesthesiologist out of Cedars-Sinai. And at the end, after 25, 26 hours of running, we got to the end and that was his first 100. And he says, dude, he's like, more about me than my wife does, So from the standpoint of, yeah, we're in pain, but it's like we're suffering together versus marathon swimming. Again, it's solo endeavors. Like, yeah, I swam with Craig Lenning across the Cook Strait. I swam with Oliver, Jamie, and Jen across the Strait of Gibraltar, right? But for again, all intents and purposes, marathon swimming it's the solo swimmer in the water swimming, right? But with ultras, I mean, not everybody likes to talk. You can clearly tell I have that problem, so I like to talk a lot. But I enjoy, one aspect I love about ultras is I love getting out on the trail, finding somebody that's about my pace, and I'm able to run with them. So that's such a big piece of it. And then you have pacers, right? The last 30, 40 miles of a 100-miler, you could pick up your buddy and you guys get to run together, right? Even if you're not talking to other people, during the most difficult time of the race, you got someone to pace with. So if I'm breaking down two of them, if I'm breaking down my most difficult marathon swim, which was Tsugaru, versus my most difficult marathon ultra run, which was the Ouray 100, both of those, I would argue, or even you want to compare it to the North Channel, fine. The Ouray, again, is one of the toughest mountain runs you can do out there. North Channel is the hardest, mile for mile, it's an extremely difficult swim, right? But if you're comparing the two, which one's a tougher endeavor? I would say marathon swimming is much more difficult. I've met a lot of long distance runners that have had an attempt, or triathletes that have had an attempt at becoming marathon swimmers, and they haven't made it. So it's a testament to us as marathon swimmers that is, in my opinion, it's much more difficult. I'd say much more. It's just more difficult from the aspect of not a pain, overcoming pain and handling pain perspective. It's just the ability to have conversation if you want it throughout an ultra, to take breaks. And I mean, yeah, if you're cold in an ultra, you can put on a jacket and sit by a fire for an hour or two. If you're hot, you can get out under the tent and douse yourself with water. If you're in marathon swimming and you're in that bad place where you're getting hypothermia, you can't get out on the boat and relax for 3 hours and warm back up and then get back in, So from that perspective, comparing the two, I would say marathon swimming is tougher.
Yeah, they both sound extremely tough to me. And then what about the community? What about the ambiance of ultra marathon runners and marathon swimmers? I mean, from my perspective, they're a friendly group. They're also a competitive group with themselves against Mother Nature. Yeah. How would you compare the two groups?
It's interesting because, people ask me all the time. I actually was just asked today, they're like, "Oh, you still swimming?" And it's like, well, I would love to be marathon swimming. It's a little expensive of a hobby. You know what I mean? Let's just call it what it is. For me, after having the kids and family life, I mean, it was a lot easier for me to just go out at 4 o'clock in the morning, go for a run and be back before they wake up, or you sign up for a 100-mile race and it's $150, right? You sign up for the English Channel, you're more or less going for 10 grand plus, right? So there's one aspect, I think. But from a standpoint of the community, people that go after the ultra run, yeah, I mean, I've met a lot of amazing people. Both sports have some challenging people, you know what I mean? But for the most part, to me, the accolades mean absolutely nothing. I mean, to me, it's useless. I mean, it's funny because it's like, you're LeBron James, you're Ben Roethlisberger, you're Tiger Woods. I mean, the professional athletes, like, yeah, but I would argue some of us are doing just as much work to be successful what we do as they do, but they're making hundreds of millions of dollars, whereas we're just kind of like, we're one thing I love, like the URAY, right? After 47 hours straight, sleep deprived, no naps, climbing up and over 14ers, we finished between 2 traffic cones, in the middle of a grassy area. That was it. I got handed a little belt buckle by the one race director, super nice guy. We had a beer and it was just like, we're chilling, I mean, I remember I swam into France, I had a little fisherman looking at me, and he just kind of like walked away. There's the days of Mercedes glides coming home to the ticker tape parades, or, those days are long gone. We don't have that, So I think that one thing I love about both sports is that, to me, like, I went after you, right? I'm doing it again this summer because I love the grassroots of it, right? Or my swim that I have in Pittsburgh, it's always been grassroots. We don't have any sponsors. It could be bigger and more, whatever. But the goal, what I love about both sports and what I try to bring more to marathon swimming, and again, in my opinion, is that I love the camaraderie. I want people to show up in Pittsburgh the night before, go to a dinner together, get to know each other, talk. The next day, you do your swim, and then that night we have the banquet after, so you could talk more. I think sometimes I found in some races, not just marathon swimming or ultras, but like some people just kind of show up and then they run and they leave. And it's like, well, that's not fun. I want to meet people. I want to talk to people. I want to be inspired by some people's stories of their plights or their challenges and what they're going after, right? So I think to compare the two, I mean, the ultra running community is a lot bigger, clearly, because, again, I think it's a lot of it has to do with the cost, time consuming. Marathon swimming community is a much smaller community, I would say, comparable. I don't have statistics in front of me, but the amount of people that compete large marathon swims is substantially less than people that compete 100 milers, right? But no, the community, at the end of the day, you're all suffering out there together. You all understand what the pain is, right? Or even better, when you find someone that's never done it before. There's nothing I love more than, like, you're out there running 100 milers and you got someone that's just like mentally done. It's 65K or 65 miles in. They know they got to go through the nights, and they're just mentally, they could get it done, but they're mentally shutting down. And you find those people and you could give them that, that motivation to hey, get through 5 more miles, get to the next aid station, take a break, eat some hot food, soup, listen to something positive, keep going. You know what I mean? It's fun to find those people to motivate them. But no, the community is amazing, both sides. I can't say it's really a whole lot of differences. I've met so many amazing people on both sides of the aisle, we'll call it. But anyway, so I hope that answers that question.
No, this has been a wonderful hour. This is really, really inspirational. I now know why you're such a demand as a motivational speaker. Just
well, to me, it's just I want to chat. Like I want to get into cycling next. I want to do other things. I would love to keep swimming. I love to keep running, and I want to do that with my kids. But to me, I just like the challenge of being a quote unquote multi-sport. You know, like okay, I know what it's like to bench press 450 pounds. I know what it's like to swim the North Channel. I know what it's like to, you know, compete at URAY. And it's like, okay, what else can I do? You know, I don't want to ever set boundaries for what our limitations are, but being happy as a father to know that if today was my last day of competing, I would be totally fine with that. Right. But it's right now, my mindset is how can I motivate and inspire them to whatever that is in their life? Like, yeah, would we love them to be runners and swimmers? Sure. But, you know, whatever that is, go after it, kid, and make it happen, you know? So one thing I wanted to mention, it's funny, again, the psychology of the swimmer and the runner, right? A lot of my running friends, they look at somebody like, for example, Sarah Thomas that did a 4-way English Channel, and they can't even compartmentalize that, right? And then you look at one of my other acquaintances, a buddy, Harvey Lewis, who just did 354 miles at Big's Backyard Ultra, like 85 hours straight, you know? So you got these extremes, and even though some people look at like me and what I've done as extreme, and then it's like, no, there's another level to this, you know? But I think that as some swimmers, even if it's just a marathon or a 50K or a 50 mile, swimmers are like, oh no, I'm a swimmer, you know? Or the runners will be like, oh God, I have no desire to swim in the cold, you know? It's funny that there's not more of that crossover for people that want to, you know, I know one other swimmer who's done some solid marathon swims and has done 100 miles. But again, it's like, do these people want to continue in both those sports? Like I would love, like my friend that got injured, he did 100 mile, he got a little bit injured. So it was different. But it's like, do these people continue to compete at these challenges? Like, to me, it's like there's the crossover aspect. It's just funny because you get these people that have done incredible amount of running that can't even fathom swimming the English Channel. And then you have people that have done crazy long swims and can't even fathom running a marathon, you know? So to those people, I would say, give it a shot, you know, have that chance at the crossover, and stop putting up a lot of barriers. It's funny when these people in my mind are psychologically so powerful, but they will be like, oh no, I can't do that. I can't run. It's like, what do you mean you can't run? You can run. Like I can run. You can freaking run. You know what I mean? Like, you know, I mean, I wasn't given the gift of perfect legs or body to do any of these things, but again, it's all up here. So I would encourage more people, if they have an interest. It's an amazing community, not only with marathon swimming, but yeah, cross over and give ultras a shot, because I mean, they're fun, and I really enjoy them. So
yeah, well, thank you very much. Again, you're the ultimate in the dual or tri or quad,
whatever you want to call it.
Yeah. Thanks again.
Yeah. Thanks, Steve.